Okay, this is to put a 1/2 inch thick puck spacer on a 2015 limited 4Runner with the X-REAS system in place. So what needs to be done, 3 nuts holding the top of the shock in. There is a bracket here which holds the X-REAS line in place. That has to be removed so that bracket floats free, because the X-REAS line going to the shock is very short, and when you manipulate the shock near the end, you need extra wiggle room. You're going to take off the nut securing the lower part of the shock. You're going to disconnect the sway bar end link, and then you're going to disconnect both sides of the sway bar from the frame. The sway bar has to be moved out of the way to get the shock to manipulate. And then you have to take these 2 very large bolts out. This is the lower ball joint. You're not taking the castle nut off, you're leaving that in place. You're taking these off. And then that separates the lower control arm from the rotor assembly. And then the last thing is that their lower control arm, these are rubber grommets in here. Don't want to mess with those, at least I don't. These are very large bolts and nuts, torqued and spec'd. So this lower arm doesn't want to go down. The rubber is resisting. So you need to lower this to give space for the extended X-REAS shock to come out. Just enough to slip the top hat or the puck spacer over it. So anyway, you have to use a crowbar to wedge the lower arm down. I did it on this side. And then you put a piece of wood in here. I'll have a video of that when it's the setup. I have a wood block sitting on the lower arm, crowbar wedged to the frame, and then you notice when you push down, you're causing the arm to go down. Notice the shock is separating, so you got to force that puppy down enough so that this top clears. That's a good 3 inches. So that arm has got to go down 3 inches. Enough so that you can slip the puck in above this bolt and nut combo here. So wedge down. Now that's after taking out these 2 very large 19mm bolts that were connecting the lower arm to the caliper assembly. Okay, I misspoke about how far the lower A arm has to go down. So once you unbolt the shock and move it, you get more downward movement in the shock itself. So you can see that this now clears the top perch. And I just wedged this piece of wood 4 or 5 inches wide to hold the arm down. And now I should be able to slip the puck with just a little wiggling over. Now the extension on that hose was critical. Right here, the X-REAS hose is really short, so that allowed the shock to rotate around and go further down to make room. Okay, I noticed an issue here. It might be a problem. So these are the nuts that are holding the top of the shock into that top mount. So the issue is that the nut is not threaded all the way. It's only threaded up here at the top. This big fat flange here has no threads. Looking inside there, threads are up, right? So the issue is that once you put that spacer in, the nut, it's going to be grabbing very, very little thread. Okay, so here's the spacer. You can see that once the spacer basically takes up that much space, right, the nut is going to, the top of the nut, which has the threads, is going to be pushed beyond. Put the camera down for a second, one-handed here. So there, okay. So now remember, that big fat flange has no threads, so the top of the nut is going to be just barely grabbing a couple of threads, 2 or 3. So I'm going to hit the hardware store and get some nuts which don't have the big fat flange, so they grab more of the threads.